¿Funciona como micrófono esto? No, ¿se oye bien? No se oye bien.
¿Pueden subir?
Sí, se oye bien.
No.
Jacob. Oye, bueno, pues buenas tardes. No, es un gusto estar aquí, aunque tenga que estar sentado. Es en inglés, ¿no? English, so we change. Okay, it's a double pleasure to be here. Once for being here in Yucatan, and we have recently opened our filial, or how you call, branch of CIMAT in Mérida. And the director of this branch is Adolfo, who has been doing a wonderful job. And the other reason, of course, is to be here because of the party tomorrow. No, of course, to dedicate this talk to Adolfo, who is a wonderful friend, who is an excellent mathematician, excellent speaker and teacher, ex-director of CIMAT and current director of CIMAT Mérida, a dedicated writer. Well, this is a facet that perhaps most of you don't know of him. Probably you will know directly reading his books in a near future. And then, of course, a very good friend. Thank you, Adolfo. Okay, then let us start with the talk. It will not concern directly the topic, the main topic of the conference, due to the fact that I'm not working on these topics. But it is algebra, what I will speak about. And this, as you will see, these topics of algebra are directly connected to algebraic topology, geometry, and this concurrence of topics is important to prove some results. Okay, so K will always denote an algebraic closed field. A will always denote a finite dimensional algebra over the field. K, mod A will denote the category of finite dimensional modules, left or right, whatever you like. Then the Krull-Schmidt theorem says that every module you can decompose in a unique way as a direct sum of indecomposable modules. Decomposable modules essentially are those who have endomorphism ring and what's it called? Okay, every morphism is either invertible or nilpotent, and that's the property which is interesting for us. Then every so a fundamental problem in what we will speak is the representation type of algebras. We will say that an algebra is of finite representation type if it accepts only finitely many indecomposable modules. For example, if the algebra is a matrix algebra, a triangular matrix algebra, It's very simple to see that it accepts only finitely decomposable objects, or algebras associated to quivers, to certain quivers, and we will just look which quivers are those. Since we are assuming that the field is algebraically closed, we can, up to Morita equivalence, speak of the algebras which are quotients of quiver algebras by some ideal. This is due to the fact that irreducible maps generate the category of maps, yes, in the algebra. Of course, I'm identifying there the algebra with the associated category. In a moment, I will be more specific. Okay, for example, if you look at this quiver, which has 3 arrows, alpha, beta, and gamma, then the K of Q, so the algebra generated by these arrows has basis the idempotence associated to the vertices plus the arrows plus alpha times beta, and alpha times gamma is 0. We're assuming that. So the ideal is generated by this relation. Then the algebra, you can look at the algebra as a matrix algebra, and then you have triangular algebra, but you have 2 additional zeros. Okay? Well. Then, what are the modules for these algebras? These are the representations. The representations, we mean by representation of a quiver and with relations just the following. You associate to each vertex of the quiver and a vector space, a finite dimensional vector space, and such that you are a linear map for every arrow in such a way that you satisfy the relations. So, example, we had alpha times gamma was 0, therefore any representation should satisfy this relation. So the map associated to alpha times the map associated to gamma should be 0, and this is the case for this representation. Okay. Okay. Locally bounded categories. Okay, therefore, instead of speaking of algebras, we can speak of categories. Yes, it's more natural to speak of categories because, in fact, we have, in the way we define representations are functors. Yes, functors coming from the algebra to the category associated to the algebra to the vector spaces. Yep. This is an important example. Well, this is a very simple example. If you consider this algebra, then you are just defining the algebra by the quiver modulo one single relation. Yes. Therefore, if I'm writing this relation, it could happen 2 things. Either this means that the product of one arrow times the next arrow is 0, or some commutativity. Yes. Well, because commutativity is also a single relation, just the quality. In this case, it means the first thing I said. So a product of the two consecutive arrows is 0. Just either the one going up or going down, but then this is going up 0. And we find a cycle of non-zero maps between the composable modules. And this is very simple to construct. This is in fact a cycle going from one module and coming back in 5 steps. Well, this is important because we will see that cycles normally are not very well behaved. So it's easy to find certain type of counterexamples looking at this type of cycles. Okay. So coming back to representation type, the algebra will be said to be representation finite if there's only finitely many in the composables associated to the algebra. But this is very seldom that this is the case. Normally you have infinitely many in the composables associated to the algebra. Then let's look at these families of in the composable modules. You have 2 possible situations. Either you can classify the composables by means of algebraic curves. In a moment I will see how this looks, but or not. If you can classify the composable modules in whichever way, then you say the algebra is tame. If not, then the algebra is wild. The wild case is a very interesting case because wildness means that this is really wild, which means that you take any algebra and the modules on the algebra, and then this you can embed the modules inside the modules of the wild algebra, on respectively of what algebra you took. Yes, then you can. It's like if you could classify the composable modules over the wild algebra, then you would classify all the modules over all algebras at the same time, just at once. Since this is not very easy even to imagine that this is possible, then people don't expect that this is possible, and then you say that the algebra is wild. I will give some equivalent definitions. This is all the stuff. This was not my mistake. Okay. Disgracefully, this was the order of the the order of the slides is not the correct one, or not the final one, but nevertheless. The slides are the same. Not quite. No. No. Okay. Well, we will speak about covering functors. What is covering? Well, with this public, I don't need even to define, because then if you have the idea what is a covering in topological terms, this is the same, exactly the same. Then it's a new category, taking a category, a covering of this category is another category, and a functor which is a covering functor. Then this is not defined by means of groups, but this is the simples of all cases. So I will consider coverings defined by groups. Then you have a covering, there's a group acting on the covering, yes, by symmetries, and the quotient, by the normal topological quotient is the covering of the algebra. Examples. For example, take the algebra A with 3 vertices and 3 arrows satisfying some relation there. alpha times beta is 0, and beta times alpha is 0. Okay? Then, yeah. Then, what is covering of this algebra, for example, could be defined in this way. This is a category. This, of course, not an algebra because this is an infinite category. Then this continues. Here, the dots you cannot see. Okay. Then you have a group acting here, and this is the integrals numbers just by shifting. Yes? So shifting 2 to 2, 1 to 1, 3 to 3, etc. And once you identify the orbits of this category are precisely these vertices. And then you obtain a functor here. And the point is that this functor is nice. Yeah? But since we are interested in representations, in the composable representations in particular, then the question is how this behaves with respect to in the composable representations. So, what is the relation? So, it's very simple to see that once you have a representation here, then you can have a representation here. Yes, just by adding, for example, the all vertex 1 and associated to this vertex, the representation here is the sum of these vertices, here, the 2s, the 3s, etc., and then you obtain a representation. Yeah? Well, this preserves in the composability. In this particular example, not always, but in this particular example, this happens. Then the question is also if you are covering all possible in the composable representations of the algebra in this way. In this case, it's also the case, but this is because the group action is the integral numbers. So, but this. So, first properties of coverings lemma. Well, then you see here the definition could be given more general. And covering is not necessarily given by the action of groups. Yes. Then here is taking a little bit more general definition of covering. What the lemma says is that the fibers are in one-to-one correspondence. Well, yes, isomorphic, all the fibers. And therefore, it's almost like a group is acting on the covering. And in fact, this is almost always the case, but it's not always the case. Okay, we will say that whenever there's a group acting in the covering, that is a Galois covering. Galois covering comes because it establishes a Galois correspondence, exactly as for the case of fields in Galois theory. Okay, and then the first theorem I will state is the following. If you have a Galois cover of an algebra like this, then if you ask if the representation type is preserved, the answer is yes, if you have representation finiteness. So if down is representation finite, this happens if and only if in the covering this is locally representation finite, which is not quite representation finite, but almost. So, are isometries. Okay, we can come back. No, and the next. So the group is a group of linear automorphisms of the covering. Yeah. Transformations of automorphism, linear automorphism of the covering, in the sense that you have this group is acting. There's an extra condition which is I have not mentioned. This is that the group acts freely on vertices. This means it is not fixing any vertex. Yes? Okay. I will give several examples around during the talk. So you have a group acting here by automorphism. You have the quotient. Then the covering is locally representation finite, meaning that for every vertex you have finitely many in the composable representations which are different from zero in that vertex. Yeah? So vertex-wise, you have only finitely many in the composable representations. And this is, so representation finite is specific. And this is quite old. This comes from the 80s. And this was an essential criterion for classification of representation finite algebras, which by now is assumed that more or less all what one wants to know about representation finite algebras can be either proved or established via coverings. Well, so now I need to define another tool. This tool is called the Tits form. Tits, quadratic form. Tits is related to the name of the French mathematician Tits, because there was some argument which was called the Tits argument related to these forms, which we will see in a moment. So if you take an algebra with some ideal given by a quotient of the quiver algebra by some ideal, then you have the Tits quadratic form is defined in this form. So if you take a function or a vector defined in the vertex of the quiver, then you sum up all the squares minus for every arrow you take vi times vj for every arrow from I to j, and plus you take a minimal set of relations in I in the ideal, and then you sum up this. The R of I to j is the number of relations you have from I to j. And then, okay, then you ask this number, this is a quadratic form. And then there's several things. If the algebra representation finite, then the form is weakly positive. What means weakly positive? It's positive, but not always, only in positive vectors. Yeah? It's like a positive form, but not for every vector B, but just for positive vectors. In fact, the proof of that is not difficult, but it depends on some arguments related to algebraic geometry. Well, dimensions only. Dimension counting of the general linear group acting in the vectors B and in the module category. And then they establish this inequality always. For every vector B, then the evaluation of this vector in the quadratic form is always smaller or equal to the dimension of the general linear group in the product of the general linear groups of dimension V minus the dimension of the module category in this vector. Yep. So this happens always. And in fact, this is the so-called Tits argument, what is written in these 3 lines. If A happens to be representation finite, then you have an orbit of the decomposable modules where the dimension is reached. The total dimension of the module variety is reached. And this is because you have only infinitely many orbits. Therefore, you count, you look for the orbit with maximal dimension. Then, because of the principal ideal theorem, yep, then you get what you want. So, because you have only infinitely many modules. In fact, this proves much more than this claim, but it doesn't matter. So weakly positive and then means positive for vectors with positive coordinates. Weakly non-negative means non-negative for vectors with non-negative coordinates. Okay? Well, and then there's lemma relates, it states some result which is quite general. It depends. It's not for algebras, it's really for the quadratic forms. So you have a quadratic form with weakly positive the property, then it has not infinitely many positive roots. What is a root? A root is a vector where the form takes value 1. And these roots are important because of many reasons. The names come from Lie algebra, really, not from algebras, associative algebras, like here. So the proof of this doesn't depend on any algebra, but the proof depends on some geometric argument, capacity argument, which I will not say. Okay, so now this little result also relates the quadratic forms with the endomorphous rings of indecomposable modules and the extensions, the self-extensions. So the quadratic form for any vector takes values bigger or equal to this difference for every indecomposable module which belongs to this space. In fact, for any module, not for any indecomposable, for any module in this space. The proof also depends on algebraic geometry, and these relations are very simple but beautiful relations which somehow establish some correspondence between the algebras, the finite dimensional algebras, via the algebraic geometry to some algebraic geometry irreducible components of the spaces of modules. Well, what I did before is enough for providing tools to the classification of algebras, of quivers. In the case you are not, you don't have any relations. So if you look, you take delta is a quiver. If you take the algebra associated to the walks or in the quiver algebra without any relation, then the classification of the representation types corresponds to the classification of quivers in the classes which are well known, the Euclidean diagrams, the Dinkin diagrams, etc. The Dinkin diagrams corresponds to the representation finite case, the Euclidean diagrams to the 10 case, and the wild case is whenever the quadratic form takes some negative values. Okay, this result is important. This shows that the algebra in two non-commutative variables is wild. So if you think of this algebra, it corresponds as a quiver with relations to the algebra with two loops, just a single vertex, two loops, and then and no relations at all. Yes, this is an infinite dimensional algebra, but I mean, you can consider this algebra. And the proof that this is wild, this means that you can immerse the decomposable modules of every algebra inside the module, the decomposable modules of the two loops is very simple. Well, essentially, it's these matrices. Well, this is for looking group algebras, which are more familiar for most of you. If you take a prime number bigger or equal to 3, and you take two copies of zeta p, then the group algebra in the commutative algebra in these two groups and this product is wild. Proof is not difficult. Then here I define, but perhaps I think that ¿Qué? Llevo, me falta. Ah, okay. The soulful note. Okay, well, works for you? Yeah. Then, okay, I will consider the case in general. Then I look at the cycles of the decomposable modules in the category of modules and assume for a moment that all cycles are finite. Well, all cycles are finite by definition. But no, this is not what I want to say. If you have only finitely many cycles in the category, then the algebra is called cycle finite. And you can prove that these algebras are of polynomial growth. Polynomial growth, what means? Polynomial growth means, of course, you're counting in the composable modules. Then the number of indecomposable modules in dimension n depends on n polynomially. Just that. And you can prove that these algebras are, of course, not wild. They are tame, therefore. I mean, I didn't mention this, but it's very important. Algebras are either tame or wild. Tame or wild. This is not obvious. I mean, because we are using colloquial language, it looks like an obvious thing. I mean, but it's not so. If an algebra is over an algebraic closed field is of tame type, is not wild. This is very simple, but it's either tame or wild. And but this is only of we are talking only about algebras on algebraic closed fields. If you take a little bit more general, the fields, let's say, of like the reals or whatever, then this fails. Okay, this shows some examples of cycles that I will not consider. Well, I mentioned this more because I think it's a beautiful result. It was proved by some Russians in the 80s, so it makes sense. It's like the Jacobi criterion, but the generalization of the Jacobi criterion. So the Jacobi criterion says what? That if you have a quadratic form, these forms are positive, for example, so it takes only positive values, if and only if the determinants of the principal matrices of the quadratic form are positive. Yes? Or if you generalize to non-negative forms, then it's also something like this. Yes, so it's of non-negative values, take only non-negative values, even only if the determinants of all principal matrices, submatrices, have determinant bigger or equal to 0. Then, but what happens if you, instead of taking positive, you take only weakly positive, or instead of taking non-negative, you take weakly non-negative? Then something like this happens. So weakly positive is equivalent that for every principal submatrix, either the determinant is positive, this is the Jacobi criterion, or the adjoint of the matrix is not positive. So it has an entry which is non-negative. And the proof needs the Perron-Frobenius theorem, which the Perron-Frobenius theorem, I don't know who knows about, but I use propaganda, simple propaganda. You use every day the Perron-Frobenius theorem when you make any, you use Google every day, I guess, and every time you use Google, really you're applying the Perron-Frobenius theorem. Okay. So the main result here is the following. So if going up, if you take a covering, a Galois covering, if the algebra downstairs is tame, then upstairs is also tame. This was proved by two Polish guys. In fact, the conjecture is that the converse holds was that the converse holds is not true. Almost. I will see more or less. And then years later, we prove that if the algebra is cycle finite, so if the covering is cycle finite, then the quotient is tame. Of course, we say that cycle finiteness implies polynomial growth. Polynomial growth is tame. Therefore, this is a preservation from up to down. But this somehow is weaker, of course, than the converse. The converse, it would be very nice to say, if R is tame, then this down is tame. But then this is not true. In fact, this is an example, and then I hope that after looking at this example, also you will see some the meaning of coverings and so on. For example, we take this algebra. This is very symmetric, yeah? Then you can send this vertex to this vertex, and this vertex to this vertex, this vertex to this vertex, and you have symmetries. These relations are symmetric by this, and by the action of that group. This is a group, a cyclic group with two elements, yep. And the quotient of this is just you identify this vertices like this, and then you obtain this algebra with these relations. Everything is very simple. The point is that to prove that this algebra is tame and that this algebra is wild is quite difficult. So in fact, this is not the case always. This depends really on the characteristic of the field. So it depends on the characteristic of the field. If the field has characteristic 2, then the algebra downstairs is wild. If the characteristic of the field is different from 2, then it is tame. And then this preservation result holds for characteristic different to 2. In characteristic equal to 2, to see that this algebra is wild, you can also use coverings, but then not this cover, but another one. Yes, you have more freedom, and then you can use a covering like this. So, if you look here, you have the action of set of the integrals, and the action is just by shifting ones in the diagonal, on the diagonal, and the quotient is this precisely. And then you can see that here in this covering you can embed the algebra, which in fact is an hyperbolic, an algebra of a hyperbolic type. This means that if you take the teeth form of this, the teeth form on this vector, which has these dimensions, gets the value -1, and therefore everything is wild here. Then a question, where did I use that the characteristic was 2? Is it clear or not? Well, I used that the characteristic is 2 here. In that this algebra with ones, so you have one commutativity and a 0 is isomorphic to the algebra here with two commutativities. Yeah? It's not so obvious, but it's a very simple exercise. Okay. Then I will, after what we said, I mean, this gives the best results which are known about coverings. Of course, this means you cannot expect completely that this equivalence holds, that the covering is tame if and only if downstairs is tame, but in many cases you can, we have. Okay, after that, then there's two directions we can take. This is one. Strongly simply connected algebras are those where you don't have any covering, any covering at all. So this means the algebra is very rigid in the sense that there's it's not quotient of anything, and this is possible, of course. And for these algebras, one can prove the main theorem. Then the algebra is on 10 type, even only if the quadratic form is weakly non-negative. Yep. So this was conjecture 30 years ago. Like 33 years ago. And in fact, in the meantime, it was proved twice or three times. There were theorems published by Russians, Ukrainians, which were false. The proofs, of course, were wrong. And then, this was proved recently. Another direction that we had is the following. If in the cycle-finite case that we know that is tame, then counting the numbers of terms in the middle of Ausländer rating sequences, I will not really define what is an Ausländer rating sequence. Just believe me, it's a very important construction for the modules. Then you take an indecomposable module, then you can construct this module, which is the shift by means of this transformation tau of x, and this an almost split sequence. Then you have a term in the middle, you decompose, then the question is how many decomposables you may have. Then what we get is that this is more equal to 5. And if it is 5, then one of the modules here should be projective and injective. And in fact, this is a generalization of some theorem for representation finite case. In the representation finite case, one had a 4 there. So cycle finite, of course, is a generalization for the 10 case. Okay, so if there's some time left, which I think it is the case, I may answer some questions. So, again, many greetings to Adolfo. We have time.
More or less remember from thinking both algebraically and both topologically, and I was wondering whether or not there was this notion of universal coverage
Okay. At least there's two ways to answer the question. One is, of course, one can define the universal covering, for example, and then it's associated to the fundamental group, just like in the topological case. And then even the fundamental group can be explicitly constructed. And then an important question, for example, is if this group is free or not. Free in the sense of non-commutative free. And this, for example, when this group is free, then everything holds. All conjectures which I mentioned hold. This is one thing. Another one is that define the fundamental group, and so may be very useful to travel to Switzerland, for example. Yeah. Okay, because I did. There was a conjecture open that Pierre Gabriel had made some years before, and then I saw this in my master thesis. I saw this problem finding precisely the fundamental group of coverings, and then I went to Switzerland for 2 years.